welcome to my channel. Today I want to talk about Kalvin Garrah and just my overall criticisms of him. Right now you're probably thinking, but Sok, your last video is literally about Kalvin Garrah. And yeah, it is, but that video is really bad. So I wanted to remake it and just actually make a good video criticizing Kalvin Garrah. Before I start, I want to make clear that I used to be a huge fan of Kalvin Garrah. Like, I would watch every single one of his videos. I followed him on Twitter. I followed his spam account on Instagram. Like, I was just full on Kalvin Garrah stan. Yes, I would defend Kalvin Garrah whenever people would talk bad about him. I agreed with him on just about every single issue that he talked about on his channel. I was a huge Kalvin Garrah supporter. The only criticism I had about Kalvin Garrah was that I didn't like how mean he would be. Like, he would be pretty mean to people, and I didn't like that. I didn't like how he made fun of people, but I was just such a huge fan that was not an issue that I really cared about. I thought it was just more important that we agreed on certain things, so I didn't really care that he was really mean to people. I found Kalvin at the start of my transition. I was probably 13, 14 years old, and I was just very dysphoric. I was very depressed. I was super self-conscious about just about anything about myself. I really wanted to just fit in with everybody. I wanted to just be a normal person. As you can see, that has changed a little bit. But yeah, like, back when I was 13, I was very focused on just fitting in. I wanted to be stealth. I didn't want anyone to know that I was trans, and I didn't really care that people knew that I was trans, but I hated being othered. I would always feel like the girls didn't really see me as a guy, and the guy didn't really see me as a girl, so I was just kind of in the middle. I wasn't really seen as a guy by anybody. Even though I had plenty of support by my friends and family, everybody was supporting me, everybody was helping me through my transition, but yeah, I never truly felt like they actually saw me as the gender I felt that I was. So when I found Kalvin Garrah, it was so refreshing to see somebody who felt the exact same way as me. He made very relatable content to me, and it just felt nice to see somebody like me, you know, like seeing somebody who was also trans and struggled with the same things. I live in a very small area, so I'd never met a trans person before, and the trans people that I had met didn't really talk about things like that, so I never saw anybody who felt the same way as me. Through him, I found other content creators like Blair White, which I will not be talking about in this video. I'm sure you have opinions about Blair White, so I'm not going to get into that right now. But I fell down a rabbit hole of watching content creators who just had the same exact viewpoint. I would just watch these videos constantly, just seeing one side of the argument, you know, and when I saw other sides of the argument, I would get really annoyed, because I was like, I don't agree with this, and I would just push that aside. I didn't go into the argument, I didn't look at it, I just continued watching, like, my Kalvin Garrah and my Blair White, and all of that. I stayed that way for a few years. Like, I would watch those kinds of content creators for a very long time, and after a while, I became kind of conservative in my political views, and I know that Kalvin Garrah is left-leaning. Like, I'm not trying to say that, like, Kalvin Garrah made me a Republican. I didn't become a Republican either. I was just getting more and more conservative, and watching creators like Blair White definitely didn't help that, considering that she is a Republican and she would talk a lot about Trump. And I became pretty much your basic centrist. I would talk shit about the left and then just defend the right all day. That was everything I did. But just to make a long story very short, earlier this year I discovered the LGBTQ community on TikTok and other platforms, but mainly TikTok. It's a little bit embarrassing, but it was mainly TikTok. And I finally saw the other side of the argument, you know? I started watching YouTube creators, Twitch streamers, just anything left-leaning. I would consume that content all day, and I kind of became re-radicalized, you know? Like, I started out a leftist, and then I became kind of a centrist, and then I fell back into being a leftist. I guess you could say that I did become the SJW that I sought to destroy 2 years ago. And, you know, kind of taking a step back and looking at Kalvin's videos again with those opinions that I hold now made me realize how, I don't really want to say bad, but how bad his videos were. And when I say bad, I don't just mean like, oh, his content is shitty, like, he doesn't put any effort into it. Like, I don't mean that. I mean bad as in kind of damaging and just spreading misinformation. The problem with Kalvin Garrah is that he frames his arguments as scientific and like, you would be stupid if you believed anything else because this is proven by science. This is just science. Which is not true. A lot of his arguments aren't based in science, especially the argument that he makes a lot is that there's a difference between a female and a male brain, and that a trans woman would have the brain of a female, and a trans man would have the brain of a male, which is not true at all. I will link a source in the description about this. But it's a myth. It's not true. Kalvin spreading that kind of stuff is it's not good because it's not true. But if I'm gonna use one of Kalvin's arguments, it makes trans people look bad that Kalvin's doing this kind of thing. I also now firmly hold the belief that gender is a social construct. Kalvin Garrah completely disagrees with that. Kalvin agrees that gender roles are a social construct, but that gender is not. And I understand where he's coming from, but gender is still a social construct. There are differences between men and women in the society that we live in now, but that still doesn't change that gender is a social construct. Money and time are both social constructs, but the society that we live in depend on them. Like, just because time is a social construct, you can't show up late for work and be like, well, time is a social construct. But that still doesn't change the fact that time is actually a social construct. But the society we live in, time is very important. And it's the same with gender. Trans people still exist even if gender is a social construct. But if gender never existed in the first place, then you could argue that everybody would be trans or nobody would be trans because gender wouldn't exist, so technically everybody would be non-binary. And I do hold the belief that everybody is non-binary, but in the society we live in, gender exists. So I can believe that gender is a social construct, but that doesn't change anything because it exists in our society. When Kalvin believes that gender isn't a social construct, and I believe that gender is a social construct, it becomes very, very hard to change each other's minds because we just fundamentally disagree. It's kind of like arguing with somebody who's anti-abortion and with somebody who's pro-abortion. If you think that abortion is murder, then it becomes impossible to argue for the other side because you just fundamentally agree about if a fetus is alive or if it's not, or if it's like a life. If you hold the belief that gender is a social construct, then that means that dysphoria is not necessary to be trans. Some trans people can just feel more comfortable being the other gender without necessarily being uncomfortable in the gender that they were assigned at birth. Technically, you can identify as whatever you want, and it is a valid gender to be, because it doesn't, like, gender doesn't exist. Male and female is something that we've made up. And I'm talking about gender, not sex. Those are two different things, but male and female, like, we made them up, so why can't somebody make up another gender? Like, what's stopping them from making another gender? It took me a while to kind of come to terms with that. Like, I agreed that gender was a social construct, but I still found it kind of weird and, like, cringy when people would use neo-pronouns or neo-genders and things like that. So if you still feel that way, that is completely fine. The only thing that really matters is that you respect people and you understand their struggle and you still validate them as trans people because they are trans, even if they don't have dysphoria. Now, after kind of thinking about it and thinking just a lot about gender all day, I realize that it's not weird or cringy because, like I said, male and female is also just a made-up gender. People should be able to just make up genders and identify as them. Neo-genders and neo-pronouns are really fucking cool, and I love everybody who uses them. I have so much respect for you. Neo-pronouns and neo-genders is just a way for queer people to express themselves, and I think it's pretty shitty for Kalvin to find those people who are just having fun and being in a community with people like them and shit on them. Like in his videos about transgenders on TikTok or transgenders on YouTube or just transgenders, it's pretty shitty. Those are just people. Usually they have smaller platforms than him, and they kind of get deplatformed because of Kalvin and his fan base. And I think Kalvin should realize the responsibility he holds when he has a fan base who's as big as his. It is not trans people's fault that other trans people are denied medical help. Some 14-year-old guy on Tumblr making a fucking trans pride flag is not going to affect you getting testosterone. And if it does, that's not that person's fault. That's the doctor's fault for not taking your problems seriously. Basically, the too long didn't read for today is that I 100% understand where Kalvin Garrah is coming from, and I understand that he probably just means well. I don't think that he wants to just be a shitty person. I have a feeling he doesn't really understand his responsibility, and I don't think he truly understands the consequences of his actions. And I also think that when he gets a lot of hate, he just doesn't want to admit that some things are his fault, and he kind of pushes the responsibility away from him, which I understand. He's young. He's probably only like 19 or something. I don't really know how old he is. He's 19 or 20, and it's hard. Like, you don't really realize that the numbers you see on YouTube are actually real life people. I understand that it's hard for him to realize the responsibility that he holds, but I do think that he needs to do that, and he should stop making videos just bullying 14-year-olds on Tumblr or Twitter or TikTok or whatever. I think that Kalvin Garrah needs to educate himself on transgender issues and use his platform for better things. I think he should use his platform to maybe spread information, or maybe he should just talk about something completely different. Maybe he doesn't really want to be a trans content creator, and that's totally fine. My hope, my dream is that Kalvin Garrah stops talking about trans issues that he doesn't know anything about. Now that I've kind of given my 2 cents on Kalvin Garrah, I would like to shout out a few YouTubers and YouTube videos that I watched that inspired me to make this video, and whose viewpoints are very, very good, and they have first-hand experience with Kalvin. I don't. Kalvin Garrah doesn't know who I am. But these two people have just had interactions with Kalvin, and they talk about that and their experience and the repercussions and consequences and things like that. So I would like to shout those videos out. I would like to start with Brennan Beckwith. They made this really long, really good video about their experience with Kalvin. They were one of those transgenders in one of his videos, I think the first one. And yeah, he made this video about him, and then there's also other trans creators in there talking about their experience. It's very good. It's very informative. It's amazing. I love it. I love it so much. There is only a part 1 up right now, but I'm sure the part 2 will come out soon, so I'm gonna link the part 1 down in the description. The other content creator that I would like to talk about real quick is Ashton Daniel. He makes the best videos. I love his videos. A lot of them are like alternative, goth, queer, just everything, leftist, just everything. It's a very good channel. So I would just shout out the entire channel, just watch all of his videos. But they also made this video about Kalvin Garrah and their experience with Kalvin. So I'm gonna put that down in the description too. I would recommend watching both of them because they're both very good, and they kind of talk about two different things. Like, Brennan was featured in one of Kalvin's videos, while Ashton was just kind of a reoccurring person that Kalvin would talk about. Used his picture, some lot of things like that. So yeah, definitely watch those if you like this video. I'm done talking now. Thank you for watching. I promise I will talk about something else than Kalvin Garrah in the next video. Please like, subscribe if you like this video, and I hope to see all of you in my next video. Bye!